So what we learned so far was that basically the original man's perception of reality was purely Yud-Ke Vav-Ke Elohim, as we discussed, seeing literally the creator in all of creation, looking at all creation mathematically through nothing more than the expression of God's will, and that was the agenda. The dialogue between the serpent and Eve is what the Gemara calls Hitzel Ba Zuama. He polluted her. And this created, as the Rambam says, an original idea of looking at things not objectively, but rather subjectively, symbolically, by cutting away the word Yud-Ke Vav-Ke Elohim. In other words, accepting there's a Lord, but stop thinking about it. Can it make it really difficult to Shivisi Yud-Ke Vav-Ke Lefanai Tamid? You know what I mean? You don't think of those terms. Allowing you to create imaginary realities, and this is what you call subjective life. This went through the tension of Adam Arishon, which he had the good memory of having the profound way of seeing things, and all of a sudden he felt small. And if you recall, he felt so small that he hid like a rabbit in a warren. This tension went on until the third generation of creation, which was Enosh. And the tension was too much because it's very hard to live with a feeling of God when it's really not what you see. And he bolted, and he created what you would call that generation moved into paganism, as we discussed. I'd rather talk to the head of the department, which drinks beer and goes to a Super Bowl, than be in the office on the 30th floor with the president, which drinks single malts, you know what I mean, Japanese single malts, and plays golf, and it's rough. He's very, very pedantic. And this social man moved away from thinking about God. This developed finally into a situation where we finally saw at the end of Parshas Bereshis, where slowly but surely walking away from thinking about God, as we learned in the past, unless you think about him, unless he gets himself involved in your life. Very important thing to remember. People have a claim, where's God? When's the last time you thought about him? And this is what Rambam and Ramban writes explicitly. The Ramban in his Pirush on Eoy, chapter 37, unless you think about him, unless he's involved in your life. If you really try your best, you Mekayim Shivisi Yud-Ke Vav-Ke Lefanai Tamid, then he's going to be very, very involved in your life. If not, no, he's going to let you just, fall to the wayside of haphazard realities and won't protect you. Terrible things may happen to you is not because God punished you, because that's the way life is, you know what I mean? Like leaves fall, you step on ants, so you may also be stepped on, and no one's going to protect you because you don't live with the God awareness. Ramban, it's a frightening Ramban, but it is a Ramban. You are natun lemikrim. God literally walks away. You want to drive God out of your life? Stop thinking about it. That's the way you drive him out of your life. And after don't come and complain, where was he? You threw him out. Well, then, man literally decided to stop thinking about him. Rambam described that people literally stopped remembering that there was a Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. It not only it wasn't a battle, slowly but surely people stopped thinking about it. It became like, who heard about it? If you recall, even the Jews in Egypt, they had to reintroduce the name Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. They never heard it before. They've been totally paganized. Anyway, it fell to a situation where people became terribly subjective. And this is the introduction of Dor HaMabul. Dor HaMabul starts with first of all, at that stage, God flooded 30% of the inhabited area. And I just want to read this piece. Okay, it's in the piece that you have in front of you, which I sent. I don't know if you have. I'll read it to you anyway. It says over there that he tzif shlishel olam. He flooded a third of the inhabited world. Shene'emar hakorel lemei hayam. He calls the waters of the sea. Ve'ishpachem apnei haaretz, and he pours them on the face of the earth. Hashem Shmo. This is Yud-Ke Vav-Ke is his name. Now, what is the reason? It's a very important thing to understand. What is the idea of a flood? Why does God punish by running away from God with floods? It's the thing to know. Now, this is a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, a very famous pasuk, but something we have to remember. When you see things occurring in the world, You always have to go back to the Nevi'im. So the Yirmiyahu in chapter 5, the Yirmiyahu Perik Hey, Pasuk Chavbet, the pasuk says as follows. Shimu, this starts with, I'm going to read first Chaf Aleph. Shimu na zos am sachal ve'en lev. Please listen to me, you foolish nation which is just heartless. You don't even have normal sensitivities. Einaim lehem v'lo yiru. You have eyes and you are blind. You see nothing. Oznaim lehem v'lo yishmo. You have ears and yet you don't hear. You just don't hear or see what's happening. Ha'uti lo tirau ne'um yud kei vav kei. Are you really going to walk away? You're not going to be in awe of me? This words of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Imi panai lo tachilu. Will you not be trembling in front of me? Why? You should. Why? Asher samti chol gvul layam. I made the seashore, the sand, the boundary of the ocean. Chok olam. And these are the laws of nature. They don't change. V'lo yavrena, and the gushing sea does not pass the borderline. No, in a normal world, there are no floods. I'm the one who makes sure by Yizgashu, and they will churn and rise, big waves, below Yuchalu, and they will not pass the seashore. Hamu Galav, the waves will be very high, below Yavernuho, they won't pass that. And this nation, Hayalev Surer Umore, your rebellious heart, when you go. Below Amru b'levavam, they did not say in their hearts, Mirana et Hashem Elokeinu. We should be in awe of God our Lord. Hanoten Geshem, He gives rain, v'yoreh, u'malkosh, different times, v'ito. Shvuot chukot katsir yishmar lanu. The seasons of agriculture are very accurate and fine. The God of nature. You look into nature, and specifically the idea of their seasons. Summer, fall, winter, spring. You know, you just had your celebration of the first harvest of Jamestown, or whatever it be, of Plymouth, whatever it be, whatever you did over there. Okay. And you're talking about how can you look at nature and not realize that there's a God which controls this and says, look at nature, the unbelievable balance of ecology, the balance of ocean versus shore. It's based on very clear laws of science, okay? But who sets that together? That's God. The key is, do you see God in science? I hate to say it, in the religious world today, people run away from science. They say, it's beyond my comprehension. I see science as the tool which the Nevi'im say, look at this and see God. No, they cut corners in science. It's Shugism. What can I tell you? That it's into the we should be glorifying science, pure science. I'm not talking about the odd every bellyache theory which comes up from some other Dawkins over there, or when the kind of hole is getting bigger or smaller. That depends on his breakfast. Okay, I'm talking about serious science. This was the Nabi saying. The Nabi saying, how can you not see me in the fact that the oceans don't flood the shores? So what happens when God wants to remind you that I run the world, that you can't forget me, He lets go of that law. And all of a sudden He pours the oceans on a third of the world, and He floods it. That's the idea of the Einish of Dor Ashel Enosh, that there was a mabul of society, literally pointing out, don't run away from thinking about Yud Kei Vav Kei. He's there, and if you don't want to invite him, sometimes he kicks open the door on his own to remind you that he's there, and that's what a flood is. So next time you think of a tsunami or a terrible flood, and we have floods all over the place many times, especially in different parts of the world, or you have these crazy things happening all over, even in North America. Okay, think of when you see water going overboard, thinking of the fact that somehow God is reminding you that, hey, don't stop walking away from me. I'm here. Every time you see a flood, that's what you think about. As I state in your I mean, and this is Tyrus Emes and this is Tyrus Netzach. It's a way of seeing things. You see it that way, you can live religious awareness and God awareness 24/7 just by looking at natural phenomena. This is what happened. So what happened at that stage? So obviously man understood that he cannot run away from God. See, remember, these people did not know what it means to live without a God. That happened much later in history, okay? Until Bayis Sheni, until the Second Temple, there was no such concept of a godless existence. We discussed this once in the past. It was only from the Greek period and further where the gods became de-deified and they became just the Brady Bunch on the Mount Olympus, which were killing each other and fornicating and fighting. Beforehand, humanity didn't know what it was to live without intelligent designer / God in whatever form it was. They suddenly realized we can't stop thinking about this. We can't stop. We can't just deal with department heads. We have to remember the president. That's what they understood. But yet man doesn't want to live in tension. Religion was tension. It's a tension which is demanding you to see things in a certain way. And since it's a challenge, but it's not the natural way of seeing things anymore post the sin of in Eden, you're forcing me to re-educate myself and reprogram myself, something which is not really, it's not simple. It is hard. It's a very challenging reality. What does one do? One goes to the next stage. I can't run away from you. So I say, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do what I want to do. And when I have to pay the bill, I'll pay the bill. Just think of today's society. We eat things which are not healthy. We smoke and we snort things which are crazy. We do extreme sports which are sometimes quite dangerous. Many people die in this way. The habits of Western society are as such, especially the recreational habits of Western society are as such, which are definitely life-threatening and life-shortening. No one, if you're trying to live a healthy life, you're perceived as some kind of a health freak or geek, whatever you're going to call you, okay? That is not the norm of life. The norm of life is eat and drink and be merry, and tomorrow we will die. So he may have died because of a terrible thing that he could have prevented, but he lived a full life. That's what you'll be hearing. In other words, you'll be hearing the idea life is for pleasure. Nothing else is meaningful, so who cares? Can you imagine a whole society like that, which is almost the society we live in? Thank God, at least in America, there's some kind of sense of religiosity because of the good founding fathers, etc. But even that's going down the drain, for goodness sakes. I mean, I'm not going to talk about your America, but you know what I mean? The Democratic Party is, when you call progressive, means they decide to walk away from Moshe Adam in a Behema Ayin. It's Taka Ayin. They're the same thing. The world will be nothing more but let everybody enjoy their own pleasures, and that's legitimate. The Gemara says the only reason that the world exists because they're still not legitimatizing Kaisik Suba Lazachar. Okay, well, I don't know about the United States of America and different other countries where they're starting to kaisik ksuba l'zacher, etc. They're institutionalizing private taivas. You must understand that this is what's happened. This was Dor HaMabul. Dor HaMabul was literally, let's live a subjective life of pleasure. And you know what? We know there's going to be a payment. The day's going to come. The bell is going to ring. Okay? The toll of the bells will come loud and clear. You know what I mean? Okay, so the world will go under. So what? In the meantime, we'll live a full life. This is quite reminiscent of society the way I know it today. Let's read this piece. It's in Beis Yaakov. I sent it to you. It's on column, page Kuf Pei Gimel. That's a small, I think you have a thin column. That's the first page I sent. He writes as follows. Achar kach, after the Dor HaEnosh, after the flood of the third of the world, Amad Dor HaMabul, the third generation after Adam, Enosh, now we had Dor HaMabul. But Yamru, and they said, and he quotes the pasuk in Eov, which is quoted in the Medrash Rabbah in Parshas Naich, describing Dor HaMabul. But Yamru La'el, and they said to the Lord, Sur mimenu, walk away from us. Get out. Dat drachecha lo chafasu. We do not want to know your ways. Ma Shaddai Kina Avdanu. What does Shaddai mean? You know, in your mezuzahs it says Shun Dalad Yud, and we all know it means Shomer Dalsos Yisrael. He's my associate, my theft insurance. Yeah, well, that's not what it means. Shaddai means Sha'amar Lo Lamo Dai. God set gvulot, set the boundaries and restrictions, just in case you want to know. Shaddai means she'amar le'olamo dai. Creation had created there's boundaries. The God which sets rules and boundaries. He says, I don't want to learn about. I love the God which is straight out of San Francisco and giving flowers in my hair. And we can, that's the love of God. The stuff you pick up in some kumsitz. No. The God of restrictions that tells me don't do certain things. Why should we serve a God which puts down rules? And that's what would happen? What do we gain by praying to this? What do we need it for? I don't want to pray to him. I don't want restrictions. Please walk away. Now, Eob says that this is what people are doing. I pointed out, how do you tell God to walk away? By stop thinking about it. Simply by erasing him from society's notebook, he will not be involved. So he says, V'hainu ki dor hamabul kfar nechachula da'at. Dor hamabul already saw this flood of 30% of society. They already knew Ki ein chokhma ve'itza neged yechalot Hashem Barach. There's nothing we can do to manipulate God. We can ask him to leave, but you know what? When he sees, he's not going to undo creation. He has creation for a purpose. The purpose of creation is for man to live with God awareness, something we have to educate ourselves to. This is the famous Ramban at the end of Parshat Bo. Tachlit kol ha-mitzvot v'kol ha-bria sheyeda ha'adam ki akel bor'o v'yodelo al kach. You have to live with admitting to this fact that I'm created by God. I look in the mirror and I see I'm a creation of God. This is the tachlis of all your mitzvos, all your avodas Hashem. The whole creation is for that. So God's not going to close the door on creation. He lets man free will. But when man is basically endangering the purpose of creation, he puts, as I said, he puts his foot into the door and kicks the door open. So they knew that there's no way you can get God out of the picture totally. You can't force him and with stubbornness. They wanted that God should leave and we will have a great life and a great creation. Let creation be. You walk away from your plan because we're not thinking about you. Give up. Well, they're not going to be able to force God to give up on his dream. God, as I said before, when he sees man endangering the dream, he kicks the door open. With the Dora Enders, they didn't want to die. They wanted the new living. They wanted the world to be just free of God. They understood that if God walks, they don't want the world to cease to exist. They want to exist, but without religion. They understood from the fact that God kicks the door open by flooding that we're not going to be able to, let's say, have God walk away from his dream. It's interesting, this tension. We don't live this tension because we don't live the fact that everything's up to God. They did. The beginning of history did not have a non-godly reality. But they realized that God's not going to give up on his dream. Man basically tells us, we're not playing the game. So walk away. No. If I walk away, there won't be anything, and I don't want to walk away, and I kick the door open. So what do? They came from another perspective. And they said, God allows free will, which means as soon as you do something wrong, he doesn't exactly, show up. He has patience. Man can make a lot of mistakes. He's not walking out, hello, as soon as you make a mistake. No, he has patience. He waits. If you recall the psukim at the end of Parshas Bereshis, where God says, oh, goodness, this has been a bad investment. I'm going to give it X amount of more years, and then I'm going to somehow flood it and, erase the portfolio and give myself a new portfolio. The end of Bereshis, where the pasuk says that explicitly. So they figured, you know what? We can't get out of that, but we don't. He's got patience, so we have time. How much does a person live? And here's something which is really crazy. If you care about society, you care about existence, it's a meaningful reality to you, you want the future to happen. No, Jews are obsessed with children because they want the future to happen. They want the future to happen. It's no joke. We are obsessed with that. We're obsessed with our children. We don't dunk children into the Nile. We don't do things like that. We are a child-oriented nation, and we are a future-oriented nation. If we wouldn't dream about the future, we would never even got to where we are. That's a very interesting thing, this Jewish religion. But there's so many societies which children are, oops, like the price I paid by mistake for a few moments of pleasure. Let's be honest. I didn't invest in this. It happened, so to speak. And I told you quite a few times, I'll never forget the boy in KBY that told me this. He says, Rabbi, every family in America has 1.6 children. I'm a 0.6. They didn't want me. I had to pay for his therapy. Okay? This is a terrible reality, okay? So you must understand, they realize that, God will give you space. So it means that we have time. Either won't be a future, who cares? The typical person in America, they care about, I'm talking about, the good, liberal, progressive living in Vermont. Does he care about the future? Oh, yeah, about the ecology. That, yes. But about the great development of humanity is shrinking. He's not caring about the future. So this is what he says, crazy things. He says, since God gave Nitan Koach Ba'Teva Liot Olam Ki Minago Noeg B'chol Oto Eit Sh'Hashem Yitbarach Manhig B'Arichut Apayim Yisir Panim Le'Ben Adam. God has patience, so the world is just going to roll, and you're not going to get punishments. And Adarabah Tzadik V'Ralo Rasha V'Tovlo. I used to, when you say Tzvei and Biyat Tahirim, that's a mess. You say on Hanukkah. Normally, it's not that way. It's Sahirim Biyad Tmeim. Let's be honest. Tzadikim Biyad Rishoim. Olam Kiminagin no way. Shenimshich Mizeh Koach Pula Lefisha Lechol Adam. Because God does not intervene, doesn't make you accountable every minute of the 24 hours. He comes after a while. This gives you a sense of freedom. And therefore, now you extend yourself freely. You don't usually think about halacha or about God in everything you do. Because he's not in your face. He expects you to bring him into your face. He does not push himself in. He's waiting for an invitation. Until you totally subvert the purpose of creation, then he's going to kick the door open. Otherwise, God does not enter our lives without invitations. So we do have place for free will. This is a beautiful language. It's because God does not intervene immediately in everything we do. We have a certain sense of freedom. Leads Pashay to extend ourselves, to express broadness, your capabilities, the eye. You really celebrate the human being. Because man thinks he has freedom. It's a very interesting line here. The thinking of the Ishbitzer is that word Le'ein Adam must be explained. Is there real free will? Or is it a state of mind through which we exist? His approach is that the idea of free will is a creative form of thinking. And he created you with a way of perception which gives you an understanding that you have free will. Thus, your challenge is using that perception and doing the right thing. It doesn't have to mean that objectively there's free will. The approach of the Ishbitzer is that no, it doesn't have to be at all. No, nothing moves without the will of God. Well, if that's the case, it couldn't say, if nothing is independent of God, and I ate a ham sandwich on Yom Kippur. So isn't that God's energy? If you're not independent of him, so then how did you do something against his will? Is it possible to believe in an infinite God, which is there's nothing outside of him? You're not really independent. At the most, you're an external expression of him and his will. So how can you act counter to his will? It's a big, serious dilemma. If you believe in the pure oneness of God, how can you believe in free will without saying there's an I-thou relationship and we are independent? We can choose yes, we can choose no. It's a very serious question. How can I have free will and yet believe in the infinite oneness of a God and not say there's a duality, there's him and there's me, and I'm independent and there's distance and I can come close to him and I can walk away from it? What do you believe in? It's either this or that. His approach is no. Anything is a sense of consciousness which is created. For example, logic. For us, the idea 1 and 1 equals 2 is a logical reality, but it could be seen differently. As we pointed out, the Gemara says that, for example, that mass takes space. That's logical. Yet in the Beis Hamikdash, mass did not take space. The Aron HaKodesh did not take space. Makom Aron Eino Min Amidah. This was to prove that, there is a truth outside of human logic and human perception. There is a concept of, there's the oneness of God, but that's something you don't really experience. You can believe. One cannot say you totally experience the total oneness of God, because if you believe you had the total oneness of God, you wouldn't have the word myself. You wouldn't have I here. If you feel yourself, then you can't understand that you feel that there's a oneness of God. For the oneness of God means that there's nothing outside of him. So why? But my name is Mendel Blachman. What do you mean I? What the word I mean? You must come to a conclusion. Yeah, you're right. They're both true. The objective truth, one God. But there is a consciousness which God created, in which man lives, thinks, breathes, and acts in. A way of thinking, a form of thinking, a perception of reality, created by the 5 senses, which are very limited. Your whole language is created by your subjective tools of your 5 senses. In my 5 senses, I'm independent. I agree. But that's a very myopic way of seeing things. Who says reality is defined by the created form of 5 senses? It isn't. So one must understand that when I say free will, yes, it is free will in the consciousness of man's perception of self and reality. Yes, within the world which judges reality through the 5 senses, through the limited perception of created mind, yes, this is the truth. It is a truth. The truth with that reality. What does the world look like from the vantage point of an ant? Heels. That's all he sees. Heels. Wow. If he suddenly goes up somewhere, he looks and see, he doesn't know what this is. Oh, there's actually this thing in the heels called shoes. You know what I mean? So is it true? Yes. In his world, the truth is the world is heels. What does the world look like from the vantage point of a bird? This is really unbelievable. A beautiful merging of the macro on top, seeing everything at once in the sky. Then he comes down and struts in Central Park. And all of a sudden, he sees the micro. He's a different reality than you see. If he could talk, he has a different language than you. His experiences are differences because he has different capabilities of taking in reality. Is my truth truer than his truth? Is my perception of reality more accurate than his perception of reality? That would be ludicrous. All you're saying, your truth is the truth which can be perceived through the human perception of reality. And the truth of the bird is the truth that he perceives or she perceives or it perceives through its tools of internalizing reality. And so too the truth of the ant. The only ultimate truth, the truth of God, he has his perception of reality. That is pure truth. That's called emes. Everything else is subjective. It's a subjective emes. It's a truth within the format or the context of the truth of the tools you have to experience reality. So understand this, a very important idea. Free will too. He who understands theology and Judaism understands it's also a free will within the perceptions of reality. As much as I am, there is nothing coercing me but myself. Whether he, as far as where he comes from, is a whole different ballpark. It's something else. And that's why the Rebbe writes beautifully, I underline the word always, le'ein ha'adam, to the eye of man. Free will is a product of perception of man. The Kinjins, he says, well, since free will is a product of perception of man, and I perceive myself as free at the moment because he doesn't intervene, doesn't coerce me within my perception. He doesn't kick in the door into my world.
That's free muffin. That's free muffin. You guys don't eat the muffin.
Well, then I have free. They were quite happy. While we're alive, or while God is still, letting me have my party, I'm going to extend myself and do whatever I want. Literally eat and drink and be merry. And tomorrow we'll be destroyed. But in the meantime, we'll live a full life, as one puts it. They didn't care if the world would end being, if there would no be tomorrow, if my grandchildren will not have a world. They didn't care. They weren't into the future. There were people who were totally celebrating the present with no care at all about the word future. It's a totally different mindset. It's a mindset which is totally self-centered, coming from an idea that the world around me is here for one purpose, to pleasure me. My full life means having as much fun as possible. That also includes, as we say, objectifying people. If you have a nice article at home, which I enjoy, I'm going to take it. If that female seems to be something which will create certain sensual pleasures to me, I will use it. Remember, we learned that at the end of Parshas Bereshis, "Vayikchu lehem nashim mikol asher bacharu, af behema, af zachar, af eshes ish." It was objectifying reality because people were self-centered, not caring at all about truths, not caring about tomorrow. It's party time. They really did know. They did see, as opposed to today, we live in oblivion. It's so funny. People don't even think, but they knew. This is the time where God was a reality. They just saw God flooding the world. They didn't think it was haphazard. They knew that God didn't. So they knew, this is an interesting tension. We know we're going to die. Today we'll call it science. Then they called it God. Okay, we know that God's going to flood this place again. Last time was only 30%. This time he's going to go for the whole thing. And he did. They knew it clearly. When God's midos will go, okay, to its top. That's it. My patience has finished. My midos have a limit to it. Okay, that's where I stop. I'm no more erech hapayim anymore. You will definitely be annulled. Yeah, we're gonna pay the price. B'chol zot, taking that into account, they were quite happy to live a temporal life, to extend themselves endlessly according to their pleasures. Some will die at the end. Yes, I'm a great, I will enjoy life, and if I'll die, I'll die. But they did not want to have the God of limits and restrictions. And that is the pasuk that he mentioned before in Iyod, Mashadai ki na'avdenu, the God of restrictions. Amoreh al atzimtzum. See, it would be kalut hamidot. Let me explain what that means. See, if you live a limitless life, you actually are a friendless person. Pasuk says, "L'tava," it's a pasuk in Mishlei, "Yivakesh nifrad." Ben Yoin explains what it means that people who seek obsessive desires, taivas, are very lonely people. They don't really share anything with anybody. They're using people for themselves. L'tava yivakesh nifrad. He who does not live with ideals you can share with other people, and you express that ideal in your way, and that person will express the ideal in his or her way. But when you're just thinking obsessive desires, what's the focal point of your existence? Your subjective sensual self. So the fact that I love X and you love X, I love X because of myself and you love X because of yourself. We don't share anything. The focal point of my pleasures is me. The focal point of your pleasures is you. We're really lonely people. We may be acquaintances and I need you to make me happy and you need me to make you happy. But at the end of the day, we're using each other. I tell this, and this is a story that happened to me, whatever reason being, I'm not going into it. I once had to take somebody to a bar near NYU on St. John's Avenue. You know, that's the place where you get tattoos and illegal licenses, and you buy whatever paraphernalia you need for whatever trips you're going to be doing. And I had to take this kid, not going to go into why, I don't want into the background. I wanted to explain how far he's going. Once I did this, Rabbi Blachman took him to a bar in St. John's. I'm not going to describe everything that was there because you're going to have you rolling, and it's quite incriminating. But at the end of the day, I mean, woo! Thank God I walked in with all the. I decided I'm going to go to hell. I'm going to help this kid. So let's just say he was there. We were there for like 3 hours. And you know, I knew it was going to happen. That's what happened. Thank God, everything's okay. You know, but then he was like on his way down. You know what I saw there? I don't know if you know the song by the Beatles, "All the Lonely People." Eleanor Rigby. All the lonely people, where do they all go? Okay, see, I know, according to the age group, Alan and Howard will remember this. Okay. Well, what can we do? You know what I mean? And that's what you saw there. Everybody was a lonely person, giggling about other people's stupid jokes, but no one really cared about anybody. It was a terrible, lonely experience. And people, it looked, I don't want to describe it all. You know, it's public over here, you know. But yeah, Howard. So you understand? Yeah, really.
No. Without it, I just wanted to say, without an Olam Haba, I mean, all of this makes perfect sense. I don't care about anybody. I don't care about tomorrow. I don't care about.
Well, they knew. They even knew there was going to be a Gehenna, but they couldn't care less. They wanted freedom. These guys were unbelievable. They were really lonely people. They didn't care about each other. I really saw in that bar, and it was really one big, you know, flirting. Remind me of a prom. I can tell you, you are nice prom boys. You know what a prom is, but you know what I mean. You know, it reminded me of a meat market. And thank God, this very much impressed this young man, and had a great effect. And thank God, how Hashem did the right thing. And I go to Gan Eden for going to a bar. Okay, but really, it's unbelievable. This is Rabbeinu Yonah with a tava yivakesh nifrad. The person who lives with taiva is so self-centered. He doesn't really share anything with anybody. He uses people for himself. The person which will be friends, if you have an idea that you share with others, that you do it your way, I do it my way, but we share something together. Lonely people are the people who are basically, they just believe in themselves. So this is what he says. These people became self-centered. They didn't care about the next generation. They didn't care about the future. There's no future. It's today. Because the possibility of having a future, as you say, Olam Haba, I say having a meaningful life which demands certain things. Okay? And if you don't have a meaningful life which not only will demand certain things, and if it demands certain things, it doesn't allow you to do certain things because there's certain purpose and direction. Okay? Well, if you don't have that, you end up just believing in yourself, which is, oh, the world is there to serve you. And kids are just oops, so to speak. And there's a 0.6 kid which desperately needs therapy because he knows his daddy and mommy didn't want him. And this is what it says here. You know, different people can come together. I have this midah, you have that midah. You have this week's parsha, Toldos. Abraham was not Yitzchak, believe me. And Yitzchak was not Abraham. They were totally different personalities, but they shared an ideal, so we can say we see them as one. I serve God my way, you serve God your way, but we all have one agenda. We want to serve God. If they would be self-centered, they're two opposites. They couldn't share company, for goodness sakes. That's what he says. If you believe Hashem Shekai, Hamorel Tzimtzum, you live with a meaningful life, which means there's certain things I'm going to do. Say, I'm not substance things I won't do. Then there's Hitkalalut Midot. Then there's a merging of different and harmonizing of different types of people and midos. Hamorel, okay. Kedei liknot aydeze biyan adiyat. You want to live world to Zeh Shamra B'Shas. Dora Mabul lo nechtam gzar dinam ad shepashtu yidem begezel. Why the word gazel? We read in the Chumash, if you saw at the end of Parshas Bereshis, they were terrible. They were engaging in bestiality. They were raping married women. They were engaged in homosexuality. And the problem was gazel? Oh, I spoke during my job, a private phone call. This is your geschäft. I mean, gefährlich, you know, we were looking at the end of this is put the Avera Gezel. What's the idea of Gezel? It's a serious question. I was always bothered by this. Gezel, that's the problem. Yeah. It's a Haimishi Avera. You know what I mean? It's very common. The firmer you are, the more you are. What can I tell you? Most of them. Shenema kimala es chamas b'pneihem v'ini mashchitam. U'medrash Rabbi quote the Medrash in Bamidbar. Vayikra. Sa'am alei avonot. You have a measurement full of sins. Mimi katreg barosh. What is the sin which is loudest, which really is the big prosecutor? Gezel. You say that in the Elah. In the Elah, you say that we shouldn't be stuck with Gezel. What's Gezel? Shenema ubitzam berosh kulam. And the theft stands on top of all. Va'inyanhu. What does it mean, Gezel? When you steal from someone else, what do you say? That the idea of limitations doesn't exist if it somehow inhibits my sense of self. There's no limits to me. I'm willing to respect your ownership if it fits with me. If it doesn't, I don't respect your ownership. You're basically walking away from the Shem Shin Daled Yud. Yeah. It's indicative of the fact that you don't live with the God awareness that there are limitations, and what he owns is his and not yours. And if you're working as someone's, you're a secretary, whatever it be, take your paperclip as Gezel. I don't have to tell it to you. It didn't prove it didn't mayor. Okay? Even Pachnashim approved it as an Issa Deraisa. Okay? They were totally self-centered and moved on. There was nothing limiting them. They didn't care. They didn't think about the future of this world. They don't let it go. If that was indicative of that society, totally self-centeredness, so everybody impinged on the other people's place. I want this, I'm going to take it. Are you seeing something here? The self-centeredness is the destruction of the Ramabel. Kol echad hibit rak l'tovat atzmo. To extend the limits of his capability of, extending himself. At Efes Makom Gvul, I want to live a limitless life of self-expression. Well, if the goal of society is self-expression, well, then we're going to have a terribly hedonistic society which will really not care about anybody else. This is the way of seeing Dor Mabul. It's a way of seeing Dor Mabul, how it becomes very relative to us today, how society is imploding. Because people, there's a lot of lip service for values, but at the end of the day, it's values which make people feel good. I think of it many times about these great humane societies, but when it came to what happened in October 7th, etc., all of a sudden, it didn't include us. The society we live in today, okay, when there was rape, mutilation, murder, you name it, and no one opens their mouth. What happened to all the great ideals? The Torah says it doesn't include everything. Those ideals are there to make us feel comfortable. We don't feel not comfortable with you getting raped or killed or mutilated or beheaded. That's not caring about anybody else. Whatever you're caring about is really about yourself. That's a serious question. Now he says something which is unbelievable. It's not gezel. Gezel is what gezel indicates. Gezel indicates that any gvulot. So there's really no difference whether it's a pruta, whether it's a paperclip, or whether it's your jewelry, or whether it's your wife, or whether it's your life. The world circulates around the self. That is the idea of Dor HaMabul. Now I begin to understand why Kimalo or it's Chomas Bifnehem. Chomas, yes, that's where it starts. Now we say something which is really remarkable. The opposite is also true. The opposite is also true that if we would be not self-centered, we would care about everything and everybody, our religious lives would be different. And here he says something very phenomenal. Which is the total opposite of what we just said. You don't think of yourself, you think of the broad idea of my I and him, we're one. That's what the Gemara says in Shabbos Amid Aleph. Madasani Lach is the member of Rabbi Akiva. Madasani Lach, that which you hate. Do not do it to your friend. Zui Kula, that's what Hillel told the convert. That's the whole Torah. The Idach and the rest of it, Pirusha, who it is its interpretation, Zil Gemara, go learn the rest of it. You know, the Ramban says that this is the interpretation of After Racha Kamoicha. I can't expect you to love a person as you love yourself. The Ramban writes this. That's asking a lot. Because there's a natural reality that people love themselves. That's what keeps them alive, and they survive because of that. And the halacha says, Chayacha Kaidman, what happens if you only have one cantina, you're stuck in a desert? Do you share it and both die, or do you drink it and the other person will die? You don't share it and you drink your canteen. That's the halacha. There's no after Racha Kamoicha there. Because the mitzvah is not love the other person as you love yourself in that way. The expression of love, as the Ramban says, is this Gemara in Shabbos. Don't do anything to your person, to your friend, that you wouldn't want done to you. At least that. Be happy in his simcha. Be sad in his sar. Yeah, that can. And don't do things that would be, you wouldn't want to happen to yourself. That is limiting. That's what After Racha Kamoicha means. I want you to understand. It makes it much more tangible, something that you can really do. So he says, Mashma, afilu mitzvot sheben adam lamakom nichlav mitzvazu, which has always been a problem. How can you say that the After Racha Kamoicha is the root of all of Torah and the rest is just interpretation? That makes sense for all the mitzvot ben adam lamakom b'chavero. I understand that. I don't want you to steal from me, therefore don't steal from you. That I understand. I want you to respect my property, I want to respect my ownership. I don't want people to badmouth me. All these mitzvahs ben adam l'chavero are particulars in the broad mitzvah of After Racha Kamocha. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you. That makes a lot of sense. But what does tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzah, and kashrus have to do with it? And Hillel told them, this is the total Kol Torah Kula. Was Hillel one of these Reform rabbis that only believed ben adam l'chavero, not ben adam l'makom? That's ludicrous. So what did he mean? How can that make sense? How can that make sense? And I want you to hear, this is a very profound thing. It helps a lot. In Yanhu, the idea behind this is, Ki Hashem Yitbarach Rav Chesed. God is really, really unbelievable, great, and He's merciful and He's compassionate. ובאם שהאדם חוטא בחטא שבין אדם למקום, היה החטא נמחל מיד. As far as God is concerned, he's the easier client. And he would really accept your tshuva immediately. You're not hurting anybody else. It's just our relationship. There's no way, just you and me, God says, okay, I'm the Bav Chesed. You haven't hurt anybody. You hurt our relationship, I will forgive that. He quotes a Medrash Tan Eliyahu, Perik Vav. You compounded your Averis 100-fold. V'asat tshuva, you did tshuva. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, I'm merciful. Here he adds a point. What is the acid test of real tshuva? He adds a line there, which is important. Yitpalel adam tefillah echat ve'umked liba. You will really pray for forgiveness, from the depths of your heart. Really mean it. If you really beg for forgiveness, that means you really want. That's tshuva. Unbelievable line here, which is so important. Now I wonder, we have all these tefillas on Yom Kippur. I just need a one-liner, umked liba. You know what I mean? But this is, maybe we have to say all that to get one line in. So why is it so hard to do tshuva? Why is it that it's not nena miyad except for asher shemei tshuva? The Rambam says it before, that all other tefillas for tshuva are not nena miyad. Only in asher shemei tshuva is nena miyad. You have an immediate answer. Otherwise, normally, sorry, it takes time. It isn't that simple. Why is it hard to forgive? So he says, Achen, lefi shekol mitzvah yesh lekdusha miyuchedet. Hashem mityacheset leizer nefesh. And I must explain what this means. We know that the Yisrael, the word Yisrael, it's written in Sholah, is an abbreviation of Yesh Shishim Ribu Otiot LaTorah. Every neshama of Klal Yisrael comes from the same source of a certain aspect of the Chachmas HaTorah of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Yisrael Araisa V'Kudshabrichu Chadheim. God's wisdom of Torah and Jews are all in one. Yeah. The Groi actually pointed out what pasuk in Chumash is the shorish of his neshama. It says Evan Shlema at the end of Parshas Kisei say, that's me, Elio ben Shlomo. He said that my shorish and neshama come from the fact of being honest in business. It's a Groi, very famous Groi. Every person has a certain kedusha, a certain chachmas HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvos, which is the source of his essential being. Do you know that some people are drawn to certain mitzvahs more than others? I always remember looking at good Rab Scheinberg, Zechat Tzadik Livracha. Man, he was a small little man. He looked like a quarterback. He had I don't know how many pairs of tzitzis on his shoulders. You know, it was unbelievable. It was clear to me that his shorish and neshama came from the parsha of tzitzis, and that's what he was into. It's a Gemara. The Gemara says specifically, in Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches, one Amorah said to the other, Avuch, your father, Bamai Zahir Tzvei. Which mitzvah was he most meticulous in? I want to understand who your father was. Tell me which mitzvah he was super meticulous about. Every person, look at it carefully. There's certain things which this you do. For some people, I don't know, you figure it out. Certain stockers, certain limudim, certain chesed, certain whatever it is. I do a lot of things. I will not eat pork. I don't know what. There's certain things. Every Jew has a certain thing to him because everybody comes from a certain shorish and neshama. Everybody comes is an expression, and at the end of the day, that's what you're drawn to. Some people are drawn to chesed. Obviously, they come from a certain pasuk in the chachmas. Their neshama comes from a shorish of a certain chachmas of Kodesh Baruch Hu, as expressed in the Torah. And the idea of us, he says, Yashar Mesed type people, which are very, so many different things. I can't imagine. I remember once I was with a friend of mine. We went to visit Rabbi Sol Abu Chatzera, the famous Baba Sali. And there were two young Belzer Hasidim there. They walked in and they asked him, they want to know the shorish of their neshama. So he answered them, was very nice. He says, you'll learn Gemara, Bavli, Yerushalmi, you'll know by yourself. In other words, don't worry about it. Learn! Then you'll figure it out, what your shorish and neshama is. But the truth of the matter is, every person is a merkava, is a vessel. That's who you are, and that's many times that's why you're drawn to it. That's why that's a mitzvah you get involved in more. And that also means to say that part of your shlichus in the world is to realize that. It's what mitzvah you're drawn to. Maybe that's one indication of that's what you should be doing. You should be focusing on whatever that is, whether it's tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah. And you realize that we're all one neshama in different gufim. That's the lashon of the Tanya in Perik Lamed Beis. We're one big entity divided in different bodies. Do you realize that if you undercut that mitzvah, you're undercutting my existence? And if you're mezalzel and mitzvah tzitzis, and that's the mazon of my neshama, you're undercutting my shlichus. That's me you're cutting. If you're mezalzel mitzvah tefillin, you're undercutting somebody whose shorish and neshama, his shlichus, his essence is the kedusha of mitzvah tefillin. You realize that every time you do something wrong, you're messing not just up your relationship to you and God, you're messing up somebody's life. You're making it harder for him to fill his shlichus because you're making a world which is tzitzis-less, tefillin-less, sukkah-less. What do you do with the poor neshamas, which you read their whole shlichus is to do tzitzis, to do tefillin? You're making life harder for them. Every time we fulfill a mitzvah say, we're enhancing someone else's life, spiritual life. Helping him fill his shlichus. Every time we do the opposite, we're making it harder for people to fulfill their shlichus, harder for them to survive and thrive in their challenges, what they're supposed to do within their shorish and neshama. I'm saying this orally because it's really an unbelievable doctrine. Every mitzvah saseh, or lo saseh, is basically a mitzvah ben adam l'makom and a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveroi. By fulfilling this, you're nurturing other people's lives. By messing it up, you're messing other people's lives. It's not just a general idea, specific people. So the Medrash says, the Rebbe writes, you know why it's hard to do tshuva? To get answered? Because God's willing to answer as far as he's concerned. But that person is being damaged because of you. You have to overcome that. That ben adam l'chaveroi, that you've messed up by not doing this mitzvah properly. That person's life is mekatrik. He's saying, hey, but what about his guy's life? This guy's life that you messed up. And you have to nurture. That's why the cloud is, if you messed up in a mitzvah, you have to do overboard. You have to be sure to be makbid more in it, as the Rambam says. You know what you're doing? You're fulfilling your friend's batteries. You took away the energy from his life. You got to add more of mitzvah tzitzis in the world for the tzitzis people to thrive again. You have to energize the world around you with the mitzvahs. That's why the Rambam writes the derech about tshuva is lasot lifnim b'shur sadin midas chasidus, not just for self-preservation, because you have to enhance and pay back for those people that you messed up. This is what he writes. So he basically says, just like the destruction of everything is self-centeredness, the construction of everything is caring about everybody, and therefore you'll be very meticulous in your mitzvahs. An unbelievable idea here, how much caring about other people is a pivotal point in the religion. And this was their Ramabel. They didn't care about anybody. They didn't care about anybody, and that's why God had to destroy it. Okay, I think that's enough for tonight. Next week we'll do Dora Palaga, and then we move on to other sugyas. This is very, very pertinent. I don't know how I don't want to go into graphic things. This is terribly pertinent. Have a great Chodesh, we're going to have soon. Wow. Take care. All of you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Take care.